We are going to explore a field where, for the most part, efforts have failed. We are trying to discover a little more about life. Not life as time, but life as energy, life as vitality, life as consciousness, will, wisdom, and action. And in order to understand these principles, we have to do something that is against present policy. We have to turn to the past. Now, the past is something more than dead yesterday. And to overlook it is to lose the most wonderful text for the study of our problems, because none of these problems are actually new. They're all part of the descent of a stream of life. We are therefore interested in trying to understand something of the principle of life as we accept it, as we know it, as we live it, and as we pass out with no understanding of what it is, or very little understanding. There are two attitudes towards this subject. The first is materialistic and scientific. Now, the study of science in relationship to the vital, moral, and ethical development of races has been generally neglected. The modern scientist is interested in what he calls facts. And facts are to him the actual occurrences of today, the actual checking that he can make of things on the physical level. He does not really try to figure out why these things happen, but he is interested in how they happen. He does not know or recognize any particular reason for these happenings, except they occur as the effects of causes that are set in motion in our daily existence. The true and complete materialist does not believe we existed at any time except now. He does not believe in any of the theological doctrines of immortality. He does not recognize a religious principle behind physical phenomena. He is concerned typically with what he calls facts, and all of his facts are more or less physical. When the facts are not physical, he is very suspicious of them and would prefer to reject them entirely. Therefore, the scientist makes physical phenomena the fact of existence. He does not know where life comes from, except in the physical sense, through the perpetuation of species. Now, on the other side of this coin, we have the religious point of view. We have that of the individual who by nature believes in the reality of the wonderful. He believes that there are principles at work constantly, that life is not simply a drifting along through a mass of physical phenomena. Life is the unfolding of a plan, a purpose, that there is a divine power at the source of life. He has his problems trying to prove this, but also he has certain points that are worthy of consideration. The physical phenomena of life is more than merely the unfoldment of bodies. Life is a stream of some kind, as shown by Furlong in his Rivers of Life. Life is an unfolding process going on constantly. It has passed through one cycle after another. It continues to move cyclically within the boundaries of law. Somewhere in this great pattern of motions, there is an ethics. There is a tremendous purpose. There is a valid reason. The theologist is not always sure what that reason is, but he believes in a divine power at the root of life, and that this divine power is the source of good, and that this divine power must be cultivated within his own life, and the principles of it applied to society. The scientist says, the theologian, in order to have the point of view that gives him hope and idealism, must ignore a vast order of physical phenomena. The theologian, on the other hand, says that to get down to the level of physical science, the scientist must ignore a mass of superphysical phenomena, which he cannot deny, which he cannot disprove, but he finds difficulty in accepting within the boundaries of science. Therefore, we have the scientist as a person actually moving in a physical environment. When he thinks of history, he thinks of physical history. When he thinks of the future, he thinks of a future of scientific historicity. He believes in the unfolding of forms, of the constant enlargement of human empire. He believes constantly that the human being is the master of all things in the material world, that the human being is the Lord of all he surveys, that he is constantly being challenged, but that growth, progress, and unfoldment are the result of the pressures of human occupation and exercise, that the physical world is being built by material means, and that these material means are largely under the general supervision of the scientific concept. The perfectly scientific person, therefore, would be a perfectly lawful person, but he would live within a very narrow rule, a rule of materiality alone, because there's no place in his system for the immortality of the soul or the presence of a divine trinity at the basis or in the foundation of the material quaternary. Now, with these 2 points of view, we need history. We need to take something that is now being generally ignored. In fact, we are almost invited to ignore it. We must not think of the past. The moment we think of past, we become involved in morality. The moment we begin to examine the structure of human history, we come into the presence of a tremendous ethical structure, a structure of moralities, a structure of laws, a structure of principles. Most of these have been set forth in the great religious histories and philosophies of mankind. Now, if we accept the reality of tradition, if we accept the fact that history is a valid instrument of knowledge, and it was one of the valid instruments of Lord Bacon in his Novum Organum, or the new instrument of knowing, we then have to realize that in history we have to study the concatenations of events in a way that we do not do at the present time. In other words, the average person is not interested in the law of cause and effect. He doesn't know why it functions. He only knows that it interferes largely with what he wants to do. And as he goes along his way, that which comes in conflict with his ambitions and his purposes is considered to be unreasonable, or at least unpleasant. So that the person today tries to avoid the challenge of cause and effect. If he goes back into history, he will find 100 empires that fell from the same mistakes that he is making. Now, this should mean that history is a valid subject. History should be taught in schools because it is the story of what happens when we do certain things. And we have proof that these happenings are inevitable and immutable. They are just as scientific as anything advanced by science. But because they deal with moral, ethical, or spiritual values, science prefers to ignore them as not provable. Yet they are provable. History is what proves them. And until we can prove definitely that the developments of life on this planet survive against historical mistakes, we have to consider history as part of the story. Now, history tells us that there is a pattern by which all things in this world move, and what Furlong calls the rivers of life. In the Bible, 4 rivers rose out of Eden and made fruitful the earth. Rivers of ethics, rivers of morality, rivers of religion, religions of art and science. All these things are great institutional structures built upon the manifestation of history as ethics. So we look around and we see that certain things always happen. Now we come to a group of people who do not care whether they happen or not. One of the reasons being that they have never studied sufficiently the records of human action and activity to realize the importance of these things. The young person in school today is sort of told that now we are living in the grand age of all things that are wonderful, and therefore the past is made up of a group of primitive wanderers struggling against the advancement of science. This is not true, but this is what the average person is inclined to believe. He is inclined to believe that now is important, that everything should be judged by now. We should judge the TV programs by now. And if we do that, we're in kind of difficult situation. And we must also beware that we must judge nuclear physics by now, and by the building of more nuclear plants. We must judge the result of destruction of our environment by now. Everything must be today. And the reasons why we're in trouble are neatly evaded, because they interfere with our good spirit in doing what we please regardless of consequences. So we begin to study what these things all add up to. Now, when it comes to this point in the view, we have now two systems. One believing that there is a principle of good, and the other believing primarily in a principle of skills or ethical, physical pursuits and progressions. We thought of humanity as a biological miracle on the physical level and a psychological miracle on the religious level. But perhaps there's something else to the thing. There's something more that we haven't investigated at all. And that is, what is the basic structure of life in this world, or in any other created sphere of life? What is life in this sense? Now, the ancients had another concept of this, which we have generally overlooked. One of the oldest forms of symbolism for life is a river. It is a stream. And in most philosophies of antiquity, this stream of life is flowing out of a cause. It is like a stream rising in a great mountain and gradually drifting down the side of a hill, gathering small ripplets to itself until finally, with a tremendous crash, this stream of life falls into the sea. And this is the great cycle of life, that this is life moving inevitably towards infinite differentiation and finally into ultimate reorganization and reintegration. Therefore, instead of thinking of life as simply an energy in the sense of humanity, let us think of humanity as an aspect of life, that life itself is a forever ensouling power. It is continually unfolding itself. And this great stream of life, which we call humanity, is one tremendous entity, an entity which is, according to some of the Hindu philosophies, composed of nearly 60 billion single entities. That what we call humanity is a vast energy, a vast concept and complex of motion, life, integration, and power. That what we call the human being is a member of this great society which we call humanity. Humanity is one structure, one being, one substance, and this humanity rises within the unfolding of universal phenomena. It arises not in materialism, but in the great process of nature and nature's labors, namely, be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. There is one mysterious power. This being is one being. And this one being consists of all individual human beings considered together and moving together in the great river of life. And this river of life is being moving to the perfection of itself. This is a little abstract and a little big to think about all at once, but it gives us a very important clue, namely that we are moving together along a pattern that is intended to bring about certain definite results. We are here to grow, to unfold the potential which we call human. We are here to achieve the growth of this being which we call humanity. This being is made up of an infinite number of separate personalities, all growing together. This great being which we call the humanity also breaks up within itself into a number of races, sub-races, and divisions, all of which are part of one structure. This one structure being a level of growth in the universe. And the symbol of that growth is simply a child. A child is a symbolic unit in this great process. The child is not born to suffer. The child is not born to make mistakes. The child is here to learn through trial and error to develop the potential of itself. In other words, by growing, the individual overcomes the stasis which we call inertia. Everything in the solar system is growing. Races grow. Nations grow. Nations and races break up into subdivisions. They can pass through all forms of temptations and problems, such as a child growing up. And this child is not going to be stronger by having temptation removed, because this would be contrary to the production of a mature race, a race capable of taking its place among the great galaxies which populate space. So we are part of the population of space. We are part of a plan which we don't know the end of, and probably will not for a long time. But we know we are growing for a purpose, that this growth is proper, natural, and if resisted, can be the source of complications. The moment we resist the motion of becoming better, we loose all kinds of sorrows upon ourselves. The child is not punished in nature simply before ignorance. It is presented with means of overcoming ignorance. But if it refuses to accept this information, the child may pass through a series of very trying experiences, not because anyone hates it or anyone wants to destroy it or that God has forgotten it, but because growth is the great reason for existence, whether it is in space, in the family, or in the world. These things are part of a great unfolding order of life. And this unfolding order of life is the thing that is important. Everything that would tend to solve things, we are afraid of. And yet we have to face these things that are right. And the power of destiny, as it was known to the ancients, is the power that says this is going to happen. No matter what we do, we are going to grow. And if we grow the easy way, we can have pleasant gardens and a pleasant life. If we decide to grow the hard way, we will have war and strikes and conflicts and plagues and various inquisitions, as long as we resist the natural law of life. That stands between, which is ego selfishness, which is desire to compete for power, when there can be only one power, and that one power is never on the side of exploitation. The one power to be one is real. Anything to divide this, break it down, and make difficulties for it is illusion. We are going to be in trouble just as long as we fight each other on any ground. Because actually, whether we know it or not, the one that fights and the one who is fought is part of the one that never wants to fight or never wants to be fought. In other words, we can afflict no one but one of our own kind. We can affect nothing detrimental except by injuring the great unity of ourself, this unity of the human being. And we have got yet to learn of the idea, the real principle of the brotherhood of man. We have to realize that the great power behind things, it wants this civilization, this culture, this great world order to succeed. It must succeed because there's no such a thing as a failure in the divine plan. It cannot fail. By the very nature of itself, it cannot fail because it is infallible by substance, by essence and by reality. So we can fight with it for a long time. We can oppose it for ages. We can put down 10, 20, 50,000 years of war and pillage, but it has no bearing upon the essential fact that it must end regardless of how we realize or how we think. First is the realization of the brotherhood of man, and secondly, the realization of the identity of all that lives. These principles could become a solution to the constant pressures of our day. Now then, when we go a little further into this matter, we begin to study the various effects of life upon these points. Now, finally, if we consider this vast unity as one, but where we lack discipline, or where we permit details to take over, where we permit a grudge to become a dominant in our lives, we begin to reap the sorrows that the nations have when they have grudges and wars. For every inclemency of our own body becomes symbolical of one of the larger inclemencies of the world in which we live. So we have a very interesting problem here to think about, namely that we are a unit of life moving through infinite space. Everywhere things live, grow, and fulfill something. Every form of life is part of something coming forth to go to school, to go to learn the lessons of immortality, to become perfect as their Father in heaven is perfect. And this whole pattern has in it not one single moment of evil. It has not one moment of selfishness in the pattern. These things are the result of the individual not gaining a proper insight into the problems of the life to which he belongs. So we can say definitely, for a moment at least, that what we call life is a motion of a great wave of entities into manifestation. That these waves of entities are everywhere in space, that we are by no means the only one, that within our own little planet there are several of these great waves moving at one time, all compatible and all misunderstood, all fought against by the very persons who should be fighting for them. The resistance to growth has become greater and greater, and the errors of mortal mind have become more and more difficult. We are rebelling against life, whether we realize it or not. Anything that does not dignify life is against it. Anything that does not help it to grow injures it. Now, all of these things that are good and bad are not tremendous. It is not a great crime or a great sin for any individual to want to be happy. We all want to be happy. But we haven't found out yet that happiness lies in the keeping of the rules rather than the desperate effort to escape them. We have a feeling that if we can get rid of all law and order, we'll be happy. This isn't true. The more we get rid of law and order, the more of lawlessness and disorder we have. All these things are part of a great plan of life. Life is itself a moving power, carrying within itself all things that live, and everything that lives is under the laws of life and under the rules of it. And the only way we can have happiness and peace is to abide by these rules. Now, in the daily problems that we face all the time, there are things we can bear in mind. Everything that advances unity helps to reveal the strength of the common pattern. Everything that reminds us that we are one is a force for good. Everything that puts us against each other to fight and struggle and to compete for authority and power, all these things are illusions. Now we say the individual leaves here. After having 70, 80, 90, whatever it is, or less years, the entity retires. Now where does the entity go? What happens to it? Does it cease? Or does it pass into some kind of a Hades, as a theological entity might be considered? Does it pass into oblivion, as science would dominantly say? What happens to it? The answer is, according to the wise, that it returns to the ocean of the race of which it is a part. It becomes again a part of the great structure of totality. But each time it comes back, it brings with it another grain of reality. Out of every life, we learn either from our action or because of our action that there is a certain truth that we are going to gradually accept. So we find all these factors working to produce what we call life. And life, as I like to think of it perhaps, is a great motion toward oneness. It is a motion towards unification, a motion towards the reality of integrities. It is the individual moving with other individuals to the fulfillment of purpose. And between the individual and his ultimate goal is ignorance. And this ignorance is evil, any more than it is evil that a small child cannot work calculus. Ignorance is a natural state of things. The matter problem is that you do not educate ignorance to become more ignorant. You educate it to overcome itself. You make wisdom take the place of ignorance. Therefore, little by little, we overcome all differences, all separateness, and become what we were intended to be, one people under God. Under this purpose, we also become aware of the vast idealism at the source of everything. We do not know the nature of the infinite. We are not able to grasp that which is completely beyond our comprehension. But we have symbols of things that seem to point towards this, and the great symbols of life in religion and philosophy and art and music and even in science are symbols of this infinite purpose. All knowledge is under law. All law is under God. And the gradual realization of this can help the individual to restore the problems of his time. Today we are worried because materialism is rampant upon the earth. We fear that we will be finally destroyed by this ignorance. We cannot be destroyed by ignorance. We can only injure ourselves by ignorance. We cannot prevent the plan, but we may reduce ourselves to a very sorrowful, miserable, repentant attitude because what we have done to injure a purpose that was right and proper. The proper end of all growth is peace. It is the realization that by working together, we advance the history and nature of all life. There is only this one great plan, divided into numerous levels, into numerous departments to help us to meet the growth problems of existence. So if we can start in a little bit by thinking no longer that we are exterminated by death, or that we go to rest in heaven for the virtues we hope we have, and probably do not have, or that we return into incarnation to pay for our sins. These things are negative. They are interpretations of great truths, but the interpretations are not right, not proper, therefore do not have a validity. They're less. By misinterpretation, we create empires, and these empires fall. By proper interpretation, we create empires, and empires live. Therefore, everything depends upon building with the law instead of against it. There's no more rebellion against truth, but only a fading away from error and a recognition of the sublime dignity of the truth that we should be recognizing at all times, so that we have no more the problem of primordial sin. Sin is ignorance. Ignorance is inevitable to the newborn child. It doesn't know, but it contains within itself the potential of knowing. Sin may be part of the life of millions of human beings today, but this is not because it has to be. It is because they have not as yet released the constructive powers within themselves. Therefore, education is not really a cramming on of sciences. It is a release of the internal benediction of understanding, by means of which whatever we think suddenly becomes clarified into a great witness to truth and reality. All these things become essential elements of a great system, a system in which there is no failure, a system in which there is no punishment, except the individual who finally has to admit he's made a mistake and is very greatly humiliated thereby. But he has to admit that he has the wrong point of view. Now we are working today to clear up the problems of nations. We are trying to find some way of bringing peace to nations, but it must not interfere with our private enterprises. We must have peace, but we must not in any way interfere with the accumulation of wealth or the building up of power. We must have these good things that we want, but we must not change ourselves in any way to deserve them. So what is the result? An impasse. Error cannot survive. Good has not been brought into focus, and we continue day after day to fight between selfishness and truth. And up to now, truth has been coming out second best, because we are too concerned with the little things about ourselves. The things we haven't remembered, as is found in some of the Indian philosophy, is that there is only one of us. The human race is one being. If we cheat anyone else, we are cheating only ourselves. If we destroy something or someone else, we are destroying a fragment of ourselves. Every evil afflicts mostly the individual who causes it, because it releases into action negative factors which will help to destroy all the purposes of life. But the law is such that no matter how many mistakes we make, we cannot win with mistakes. Nor can the mistakes destroy us. They can only humiliate us. They can only restore our final faith in the realities of life. In the end and in the purpose of things, they are good, even though we have trouble facing them when they occur. So we let us think of life, therefore, as a great stream of eternal power, the very lifeblood of deity, the infinite of space, that which is known is unconquerable, that which is inevitable, that which is eternal. And in this flow all the races, nations, and peoples of the earth. And they're all flowing eternally towards unity with truth, unity with beauty, and unity with love. It is only our own selfish self-centeredness that breaks us all up into wars and camps and political systems and conflicting psychological entities. There is no reason for these things. There is nothing finally except this tremendous motion of life towards the fulfillment of its own divinity. Now, when this divine life finishes itself, when we finally come to the point where all of these entities have unfolded the potential which is in them, what happens? Then, according to mythology and legendary, we give birth to another race of gods, another race of divine beings that become the parents of worlds, the parents of systems, and take their place in the great hierarchy of eternal growth that goes on forever, beyond the stars, beyond the horizons, beyond the infinite, beyond the galaxies. There is nothing. We do not know what lies beyond. We do not know the infinite good, because we have not achieved the finite good as yet. But it's coming, it has to come. And in the fullness of time, we will see that we are one being, flowing through time and eternity to the fulfillment of the purpose for which we were intended. We do not know exactly what that purpose is, but we know that that purpose rests in the mind and heart of the deity at the source of life. The principle at the source of life ordains that we shall achieve and shall become co-workers with the angels and the archangels in the forming and shaping of destinies for worlds as yet unformed. It is a great system of eternal growth, and we should be very glad, because there is no place in it for the infirmities of failure. They are all instances in a great success, and we must view only the great success, and let that be the will of the power that we seek to serve. Well, I guess that's for the moment.